Welcome back. It looks like we are all making our way back into the main room. First off, my thanks to all of the panelists, David and Stephanie and Lowell and Tom, Melissa and Chuck, Devin, for teeing up research possibilities for us and for conversations which allow us to really start to move forward on how do we specifically, tactically, theoretically, in some cases, methodologically begin to move these research possibilities forward. And to talk more specifically about that, we've been lucky enough to have the small business economics special issue editors join us. And so that list includes the 5 people that are on the screen in front of you. And Brigitte, Neils, and Elco have been gracious enough to come talk to us and share with us their experiences now from sitting on the other side of the desk and receiving some 100 submissions about what does the state of the field look like in terms of research, and as specifically, what are they doing around their special issue? What does it look like going forward, and kind of why did this all come together? So with that, I'll turn it over to Brigitte, Neils, and Elco to carry us on, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brad, for the opportunity to present at the L.I.F E conference. Let me try to share my screen with you. Here we go. I think you should now see my screen. Yeah, so very happy to be with you today. The theme of the conference is exploring research possibilities, and we will talk about the publication possibility. We've seen some great publications on the topic of religion and entrepreneurship in some top e-ship journals in the last year. And we want to share our experience today with compiling a special issue on the topic for small business economics. So my name is Neils Reitveld. I'm working at Erasmus University in the Netherlands. And today I'm here with Brigitte Hoogendoorn. She is also from Erasmus, and Elco Van Burg. He is also with us today. He's from the Vrije University, Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And the 2 other SI editorial team members are Marcus Desjardins from the University of Namur in Belgium, and Frank Janssen. He's from the University Catholique de Louvain, also from Belgium. So we want to give you some insights about the process behind compiling the SI, and then we want to share some insights about the proposals that have been submitted as an answer to the call for proposals. This is the process, more or less, in a timeline. Frank Janssen, he came up with the idea of a special issue on the topic, special issue for small business economics. He reached out to Marcus. Marcus is an editor of small business economics. Frank also reached out to Brigitte. Brigitte reached out to me, I think, and I suggested Elco to be part of the team. So within 1 month, we had the team complete, and we put together an idea, a draft call for proposals, which he submitted to small business economics, and the editors were very eager to follow up on this, and they agreed upon a special issue on this topic. So we published the call for proposals in July, and we asked to send in proposals before December, and we were very happy that we received almost 100 proposals in the end, 92. Several came after the deadline, but we didn't take them into account because we were already at 92. So then it was up to us as editorial team. We needed to decide upon which papers would be suitable for the paper development workshop. So we looked at the fit with the call. I will give you some more information about the call on the next slide, whether they were also in line with the editorial policies of small business economics. We looked at the originality of the proposals. We also looked whether it was realistic that the study could be completed before June, because in June we want to see the full papers. We also looked at the rigor of the proposal, especially the methodological rigor. So in the end, we invited around 15 papers for the paper development workshop. Some didn't want to take part in it. It was also not compulsory. And we will come back to that at the end, but you can also submit full papers without having presented at the paper development workshop, and that's why this is still an opportunity for you. But in March, so last month, we had a paper development workshop. We did it online. It was a very great experience, and 12 presentations in total. So what were we looking for? Yeah, we were looking for papers that were going a couple of steps further than papers so far on the topic religion and entrepreneurship. So if there are already quite some papers showing linkages between religion and entrepreneurship, but we wanted to see more the mechanisms, what is between religion and entrepreneurship at all kinds of levels, and whether these linkages are context specific. Most of the papers so far focus very much on religions predominantly present in Western countries, Christianity, and we were looking for contribution investigating less well-researched religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and so on. In many papers so far, religion is treated very unidimensionally, like you belong to a religion or not. We want to see contributions, looking at aspects of religion. So not only belonging, but also active participation, for example. We didn't look only for, say, straightforward relationships, but also how a religion influences individual level outcomes. So, for example, does religion moderate individual decision making? So these were the more, say, traditional answers we wanted to see. The other bullet points are more innovative. So how can our religion lens help to understand the entrepreneurial process? So what are religious aspects of entrepreneurship? And do religious beliefs influence the pursuit of specific types of entrepreneurship? So in many papers so far, it's just entrepreneurship in terms of self-employment. Maybe social entrepreneurship or high ambition entrepreneurship is interesting to explore. So final questions: how do dark sides of religious practices impact religious influenced entrepreneurship? And how can entrepreneurship theories help to understand religious concepts and processes? And we particularly think that here some nice contributions can be made. So to give you an overview of all the 92 abstracts at once, we created this word cloud for you. And this word cloud is based on the 92 proposals we got. Well, very obviously, words like entrepreneurship and religion, religious business, entrepreneurs, they stand out. But there are a couple of interesting ones like Islam or Islamic. That word is popping up quite a bit, and that's also what we have seen. Many proposals were about Islam. Some other words are also worth mentioning. The institutional approach is very often taken in these proposals. Quite a few were about female entrepreneurship, so we have the word women here, and values. That's a word that also came back in many proposals. But a more detailed analysis is going to be provided by Brigitte now.
Yeah, thank you, Niels. So what I did in the past few days is I went over all these abstracts again and to try to classify them, just to give you some observations that we get from all these proposals that we received. And of course, this is not representative for all the research out there. Probably there is a bias towards small business economics, but nevertheless, we think there's a number of interesting observations to be made. So here I looked at the religions that were present in the 92 abstracts. And most of the papers have had a mixed setup, so they included several religions at once. And we also see that Christianity and papers that includes the Islam were dominant. And then we had a few that concerned other religions, and especially those religions that we were looking for. So Buddhism, Hinduism, 2 papers on Quakers, and Jainism. And what was interesting also to realize in going over these abstracts again was that oftentimes religion was not well specified. It was just mentioned being religious, whatever that may mean. We've seen a few papers that sort of split religion into more detail. So they talk about several dimensions of religion. And mostly that were the papers that were using World Value Survey or another form of the European Value Survey, African Value Survey, where there are a number of questions specific on religion. But we haven't seen any papers that were really, trying to flesh out this idea of what is religion and how can we measure that in different ways. Yes, then something about the methods applied. What did we see here? Many quantitative and qualitative papers. For the quantitative papers, they were mainly based on secondary data sets. They did use various techniques, many regression techniques, structural equation modeling, 2 papers with experiments, very interesting. And when it came to the qualitative papers, we see that the case-based dominated. A few papers that were single case-based, so very much in-depth. And those that used several cases ranged somewhere between 20 and 40, mainly interview-based. And we had a few literature reviews and also some conceptual papers. When it comes to the level of analysis, by far the majority were individually at the individual level. A number were at firm or institution level, so some were really from the point of view of a church or a microfinance institution, for example. And less frequent were the macro papers and the multi-level papers. When it comes to country coverage, we were, at least I was very happily surprised that we've seen papers and proposals coming from a huge variety of countries. So here you see some reflected. The US dominated, by the way. And if I go through the list, then what also struck me was that Southeast Asian countries were not very well presented. But apart from that, USA, Asia, Europe, Africa. It was nice to see also from some very small countries that we have interesting proposals. Then something on the dependent variables. So what were these papers trying to explain? If they were trying to explain anything, we also had some conceptual papers and literature reviews. But one thing that was very striking, that by far most of the papers reasoned something like, okay, we have some form of religion measured in some form, and religion determines something else, usually related to, of course, entrepreneurship. Frequently, religion has to do with performance of enterprises, with the prevalence at regional country level. Sometimes religion, how it relates to entrepreneurial attitudes or mindset, and also how religion relates to entrepreneurial action or entrepreneurial orientation. So this was by far the most common structure that we've seen. And some exceptions. So the literature reviews, conceptual papers that deviated from this dominant approach. When it comes to the types of entrepreneurship, yeah, maybe the same as with religion. In a number of papers, it was not very clear. They were talking about entrepreneurship and not specified whether they were talking about self-employment, business ownership, being entrepreneurial as a behavior instead of owning a business. So that was something that struck me. One other thing that was very interesting, and that also was shown in the word cloud that Niels presented earlier, there were a few types of entrepreneurship that were regularly addressed that we do not necessarily associate with profit maximization. So there were a number of papers on women entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, or hybrid forms of entrepreneurship, migrant refugee entrepreneurship, and micro entrepreneurship. And maybe in the same category, family businesses, not always there for profit maximization per se. So that was interesting. And yeah, it's probably worthwhile to dive into this, why we think that religion is associated with these types of entrepreneurship. And I think this was the part that I wanted to show you, just to give you a glance. On some of the mechanisms, Elco will take over.
Thank you, Brigitte. And I'm very happy to give you a bit of insight in what people try to come up with in terms of an explanation of the link between entrepreneurship and something else, or with religion and some form of entrepreneurship. So the most common mechanisms are, well, quite straightforward mechanisms that you might think of as values, often related to religion, including Protestant ethic. And so that's the most common thing we saw in terms of proposed mechanism. And I have to say, there were also 25% of the papers were not proposing any mechanism, sometimes due to the method, right? So if you have a conceptual paper creating categories, there might not be mechanisms, but also some quantitative papers that just propose the relationship between religion and entrepreneurial performance, for instance, without explaining why that should be the case. But then for those who did, we got those percentages. So social capital, so community building through entrepreneurship is definitely a social mechanism that's quite often studied. Risk taking and perception of uncertainty, including fatalism as maybe an effect of some forms of religion. Was there, and that's quite an interesting one, I think, and it might be a novel way of addressing this relationship, I think. Same with specific beliefs about wealth. Some religions have really strong beliefs about wealth. Think about Islam not taking interest, or the Quakers in their rules about what you can do in terms of profit taking, and those are interesting specific religious beliefs that I think, and well, found it interesting to see that. Then we have more, well, less frequent ones, a couple of quite straightforward mechanisms or kind of common mechanisms, and orientation is there, psychological enablers, and motivation, intention, leadership style. And sometimes we also had the impression that people just throw in some variables there to find a relationship. But sometimes it's really meaningful. Let's say, it's not saying that those things, let's say religious leadership can really be a different thing and explain something. But sometimes it's really specific for religion. Let's say framing of means in terms of how people deal with givenness of means, for instance. Religious coping is definitely an interesting one. Also specific to religion and entrepreneurship, I think, how people deal with things along the route of entrepreneurship that do not work out well. And then there's a couple of interesting ones that were not really that well explored or that often explored, but might be interesting. Let's say transcendental partnership. So do people have something else than social partners, but also transcendental partners help that they feel helps them along the way. Resourcefulness, revelation, maybe in terms of opportunity recognition or opportunity identification, imagination, relativism, probably relate to uncertainty beliefs or uncertainty perceptions, enjoyability or fun, or what's the goal of your entrepreneurial venture actually for, and corruption was we found one abstract saying, well, religion and corruption are probably related, and it might be a thing to explore further. To wrap up, did we answer the call? So we had those different questions, and here we see the questions that we got quite some abstracts on the mechanisms, on less well-researched religions, on individual decision-making, and different types of entrepreneurship. That was well covered in the abstracts. But then might be interesting to look at, well, what's not covered so far in the abstracts, and might be rooms for the research, as well as maybe still opportunities to submit to the special issue, and you never know. One about, can religion explain some phenomena in entrepreneurship that we don't really understand so far, or can shed new light on it? For instance, think about idolatry as a religious concept that might play a role in how entrepreneurs stick to their venture. Well, they should actually leave the venture or something like that. Aspects of religion, there's definitely more aspects to be explored than we saw so far. So it's more differentiation needed. Most studies still take religion as a quite monolithic concept in a way. I think we didn't get any papers on dark sides, or especially studying dark sides of religion, yeah, and there definitely are dark sides. We know that from studies of religion in general. So there'll also be negative effects on entrepreneurial processes, I suppose. And the reverse direction, let's say, how can entrepreneurship theories explain something in religion? That's also not that often explored, I think. It might also be difficult to publish in entrepreneurship journals, of course, but you might need to go to different type of journals then. And so finally, just to wrap up and invite you for considering this special issue, if you have something laying around that you can get in decent shape in 1 or 2 months, then there's still room to work on that and submit it. You have to submit it to Frank and Marcus because, well, there's a reason that SBE doesn't really cover special issues through their system. I'm not sure why, but you will just follow the regular process anyway. So it's not really that you have a backdoor or so. It's the regular process for the special issue.